We finally have some new information on Doom: The Dark Ages. First, the release date, May 15th, less than 4 months from now. We're going to be playing a new Doom, and a Doom that looks to be a very unique experience from the other two in the trilogy. I was invited to attend a private Q&A with Hugo and Marty a few days before the debut of the latest footage, and we learned a lot. I'm not going to go into everything they talked about, I'm just going to stick to what interests me the most. Expanded levels. There's going to be a more open experience with exploration, secret hunting. I imagine there could be some optional combat encounters, maybe even boss fights, I don't know. But they also said that this is not an open world game. I'm happy to hear that. I don't want an open world Doom, but a more open experience is something I'm down to dive into. Adjustable difficulty. The Dark Ages will actually allow you to increase and decrease several aspects of gameplay to create your own challenge, in addition to the standard difficulty settings, which I assume are not just slider settings. I gotta pat myself on the back here because I suggested this exact thing for Doom Eternal in my August 2020 video, Things I Want to See in Doom Eternal, so I'm thrilled to see this. I wish more games had customizable challenge. It's great for replay value. You can adjust damage, parry timing, and even game speed. So cool. The difficulty sliders are really exciting because you see that we can actually tweak our resource values, we can increase enemy aggression, and so people who found the previous Doom games, more specifically Doom Eternal, too challenging for them to get into, can lighten the experience and still have their idea of fun, but the rest of us who really care about being pushed and challenged can actually increase that to push ourselves more. It's a win-win. But it's also going to make this game a little hard to review. How can you review a game and talk about its difficulty when it's this flexible? It's going to be interesting. No multiplayer. I 100% support this decision. Making a robust, balanced, exciting multiplayer mode takes a lot of dedication, and they explicitly said from the beginning of development, no multiplayer, so they can devote all their resources into making the campaign as incredible as it can be. That's great. I'm sure plenty are disappointed, but I'm not one of them. Weapon range. We heard them say that they want to bring you in closer to the enemies, so your guns are short to medium range in their effectiveness. Does this mean we won't see any precision long-range weapons like railguns and sniper attachments? Quite possibly, and I for one am totally okay with that. I've said before that while I do like the ballista, I think railguns are more of a Quake thing and Doom is a shotgun game. Look at the original Dooms, you had no way to snipe someone from across the screen. Lower complexity. In the Q&A, Hugo talked about how looking back on Doom Eternal, he thinks the game is too complex. And, well, I don't feel like that now, because I'm good at the game. But sure, it introduced too many mechanics too quickly. It had 3 different kinds of upgrade currencies. I can see why, as the director, he would look at his own creation that way. I wouldn't change Doom Eternal, not at all, but I am sympathetic to the feeling and I know where it comes from because for some people it is overwhelming. And with a new game that's slower, grounded, focused on getting people into the game in a smoother way, I only hope that we still have a lot of depth. Less immediate complexity does not necessarily mean less depth. There are games out there that use 2 or even just 1 button and they are incredibly deep. Fingers crossed. Old school mentality. One of the most interesting things to see in the Dark Ages is the deliberate return to classic Doom. The realization that these 30-year-old sprite-based games without a jump function are still very fun. And since they pushed Eternal's formula as far as it could go in its wild verticality, finding inspiration in going the opposite direction with strafe shooting and projectile dodging gameplay from 1993 is honestly really exciting. I like the idea that someone who has only played Doom 1, 2, and 64 could pick up the Dark Ages and say, wow, yeah, this is Doom. And it was interesting to hear them talk about slowing down projectile speed in order to create more of an arcade shoot-'em-up feel, like the original had, weaving through an onslaught of projectiles while still being able to focus on your target. Absolutely classic. Parries. If in Doom Eternal you were Jackie Chan, in the Dark Ages you're the Terminator. There's a real difference in player speed, verticality, but also in the sheer number of enemies you're fighting at once. It looks like an absolute slaughter, but we're also seeing a big emphasis on the new chainsaw shield and how it's used offensively and defensively. We see the shield being thrown and it returning to you after hitting a lot of demons, but we also see it being thrown into a single enemy, with the Doomslayer being pulled directly to him. We see it being used to reflect indicated projectiles, to block large amounts of enemy fire. You'll be able to parry melee attacks, and some enemies will have multiple melee attacks in a sequence that you'll have to parry to stun them. This, for me, is the biggest question mark hanging over the Dark Ages. How much are we going to have to use the parry in order to defeat enemies? Are there enemies that are essentially miserable to fight if you don't parry them? Are parry-focused enemies common? I, for one, am not a big fan of parry-based gameplay. I don't mind a parry option if it is an option. Sifu, Ninja Gaiden, God of War, Devil May Cry, all of them have parries, but it's not very common that you have to do it. It's just one tool that you happen to have. And sometimes I use it. I just don't enjoy constantly having to parry in video games. It's just not for me, guys, I'm sorry. So how's Doom the Dark Ages gonna handle this? One thing that's nice is that we'll be able to tweak the parry window, so anyone should be able to do it. I know this isn't going to be a game all about parries, but it looks like it's going to be important. And if parrying is part of the intended fun, I'm gonna go in open-minded. Real-time glory kills. As many discerned from the first trailer, you control your glory kills now. Meleeing enemies from different angles does different things, and they even mentioned how if multiple enemies are staggered, you can do one attack that kills all of them. I think we're about to see some amazing stuff. The faltering system. Much to my delight, Hugo said, quote, "Mayo will be happy to hear that the faltering system definitely plays a role in this game," and then he explained a bit about the parrying ability causing falters. I appreciate the mention, that was very cool, but it's great to hear that Doom Eternal's faltering system has carried over in some way, since this was the most interesting mechanic in that game. We didn't get confirmation on breakable weapons, but I still suspect that this scene of a Mancubus's arm ripping off is confirmation that it will return. And that brings me to my own predictions about this game. No, not my current predictions, my predictions from 2022. In the videos, the next Doom must have these 6 things, and there is no Doom Eternal 2 and the meat hook must go. I invite you to watch those videos, but the general idea was that I said the next Doom needs to be very different from Doom Eternal, so we can have a fresh experience to learn and be excited about. It creates community, it inspires, it makes you want to think and talk about it. I said that the next game needs to ditch the meat hook because it would cause the game to be too familiar, and I said it absolutely had to include the faltering system and the weak point system. It looks like that's the direction we're heading, folks, and I couldn't be happier. This game is gonna rock, and I can't wait to play it, dissect it, argue about it. It's gonna be a good time. See you in May.